June 25th. I'm Ryan Arnold from Easthampton Media. And the format today is going to be as it has been. You can submit questions for the mayor or for Representative Dan Carey in the chat window, or you can wait until the end of the meeting when there will be a time where you can unmute your microphone and ask it with your own mouth. All right, Mayor LaChapelle, you ready?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everyone. Today we have on Town Hall, we start at 10 o'clock with Representative Dan Carey, who represents Easthampton, South Hadley, Granby, and Hadley, a part of Hadley and a part of Granby. And so I asked the representative on to go over some numbers with us, and also just issues that are really on the forefront of all of our minds here in Easthampton and how they're being spoken to by Representative Carey, but also others out in Boston. So what I'd like to do is just, Representative Carey, if you could say hello and opening comments, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, and then we can open it to Q&A. Take it away, Dan.
Great. Good morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation, Mayor. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hampton Media and Ryan and everybody over there for making this happen. It's so great for us to continue to connect even as we're sitting at home away from each other. So I'll give you a little update. You know, I think it's been almost 2 months since we did this last.
Yeah.
You know, and it feels like everyth's changed, you know, and nothing's changed as we still deal with this pandemic and we still physically distance and stay at home. But a lot going on also.
Yes.
At that time, I think the House of Representatives had just had its first remote formal session.
Yes, right.
The day before, right, or that same week.
Right.
And so that's continued, which has been great. We're still, you know, we'll have maybe, there's 160 reps in the state, and we'll have maybe 10, 12 in the chamber during a session. We were actually in session yesterday, and the rest of us will be at home following a video on our computer, listening to the audio on our phone, voting over the phone into the chamber. You know, we can speak to everyone from home over the phone. And so that's allowed us to get some more things done. Yesterday, we did a $3.1 billion supplemental spending bill. Yeah. That was just related to COVID-19. And we're hoping that moves quickly. Hopefully the Senate's taking it up today. Because what really we're doing is looking at a lot of the spending that's happened over the last 3 months.
Right.
And making sure that Massachusetts is in the federal queue with FEMA to get federal reimbursements that are available. So that was a lot of what that $1.1 billion. On Monday, we moved a $5.25 billion bill, excuse me, to cover July as our fiscal year ends the 30th, you know, early next. So
can I ask?
You can ask. What was that?
All right. So in the $1.1 billion budget, there, the rush, and I'm just trying to, so that money helps what we've spent on COVID or what we've lost on COVID in Easthampton, or is that bridging our state budget going forward?
It's more of the first thing, you know. It's reimbursements from the federal government, right? And it goes to many different areas, as $1 billion would. You know, there's just $350 million in there just dedicated to PPE. There's you know, $45 million for community tracing. All these initiatives that we've done so far, but also looking forward on we're going to have to keep doing this. You know. That's as we reopen the state more and more. Right. And I know, you know, this from your work on the reopening advisory board. Yeah. We're not out of the woods. And sometimes it feels like it is because it's summer and we're getting outside and we're getting to restaurants and all these normalcies that I'm glad are coming back. But we still need to be so careful And, there's still that risk of a second spike. I was glad to see last week we had free testing available across the state for anyone who thought they might need it, whether you went to a birthday party or a protest or a rally, or if you thought something, you may have been in a situation to contract it. And over 17,000 people went and got tested. Those results came out, it was about 2 to 2.5% of those 17,000 people tested positive for the virus, which is about in line with the average of percentage of who has it anyway. So great to not see a spike already because of the nice weather and because of the large things that have been going on. So that was encouraging, and hopefully we can continue. We've done a good job at the outset. It was all we heard was flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. And Massachusetts has done a great job at that, but it's something continue to be diligent and continue to stay safe and healthy.
And also on Twitter, I saw a little bit of Representative Williams speaking to Juneteenth. And can you give us an update on Juneteenth and becoming a state holiday?
Absolutely. Yep. So there was bills filed in the House and the Senate, which I'm a co-sponsor of, to make Juneteenth a holiday. And then even more than that, on our supplemental spending bill yesterday, Bud Williams from Springfield attached an amendment to that bill to make Juneteenth a state holiday, and that amendment was adopted unanimously by the House of Representatives and passed on with this bill. And so hopefully the Senate will do that also, and that'll be a quicker way to make this happen. But it's been really great to see everyone rallying around that idea. That's an idea that has come up in the past and never moved forward, and that it passed unanimously. Western Mass was at the forefront with Rep. Williams. He gave an impassioned speech around this idea and shouted out for the 413 multiple times. And our colleagues, Rep. Dom and Senator Comerford, and some great people over at UMass who are discharged.
That's great.
With the spending bill, and then hopefully that soon.
Yeah, and as we're moving, and I'm kind of shuffling. I can't see how many people are on the town hall. I don't know what's going on with my computer, so I want to get these questions. But of course, as always, we open it up to everybody to ask questions of myself or to the guest, Representative Carey. So I want to make sure we get to have time, before 11 o'clock. So with the, as we're going for, I saw the announcement, our regular budget is not going to be ready by July 1st. And do you see the state level budget, the process is the process as far as where it goes and starts, and the governor got us a budget in January and so much has changed. Do you see a lot of debate or amendments or whatever the tool would be to kind of reshift funding that we've been seeing called for on the city level, but also the state and the national level around policing services and, let's say, reallocating those to services that have been classically underfunded, around mental health, addiction services, schools? I mean, do you think that there is, I know that conversation is happening now. Can that conversation on the Hill happen and affect our next year budget, or are we just so up against it with just needing to get a budget passed that it's a conversation that really will see an effect in fiscal year 2022?
It's such an important conversation and an ongoing conversation. I know locally, I watched that 6-hour city council meeting recently. Had some really great insights and great comments, and it's happening on the state level as well. We've really seen, we've always had great leadership from the Massachusetts Legislative Black and Latino Caucus, but they have really stepped up, and again, led by Western Mass Springfield's Representative Carlos Gonzalez, is the chairman of the caucus, and they put out a great 10-point plan, what they'd like to see, and it had points that address government, state government, and even local government. And so I've been working with my colleagues on that caucus and throughout the legislature on focusing on some of those goals. And, you know, one of those goals for the state was the post system, the police officer standards and training.
Yes, that was my,
I recently submitted a bill around that. It might not be a perfect bill, but it's something that I think has a lot of support, and it makes all the sense in the world that we have standard certification, standard decertification, which I think is the most important that system in that bill. You know, the certification's fine, but what that really allows us to do is then find the bad actors and remove them from the job. Let them just move 2 towns over and go get, you know, keep it up. You know, I think that's so important that we have that. And you know, as far as the budget's concerned, it's going to be a different budget than years past because we're in this global pandemic that's precipitated this fiscal crisis. I mean, that January budget that the governor submitted is based on past revenues and projected revenues. Here's what we think the economy, we know it's doing. Here's what we think it's going to continue to do. And that really is out the window. That was a $44.6 billion budget in March. As soon as this thing started, you know, we said, all right, we're going to be shut down for a couple weeks or a couple months. We'll probably be down $2 to $4 billion when we come back. And now with this longer and longer than anyone wants to, which is important that we do for our, you know, our health and our safety and our neighbors and our communities. But now, you know, the latest numbers are saying it could be that 2 to 4 billion went to 4 to 6 billion. And now
I just read that.
7 to 8 billion. You know, I heard the Speaker of the House recently was talking about this, and he said the hole just keeps getting bigger. And that was not a phrase I enjoyed hearing, and it had stuck with me since I heard it because, you know, we're talking about now $7 to $8 billion in lost revenues. And that's why the budget is moving so slowly. We look at the last month's revenues to help us project next month's revenues. And so in April, the March revenues weren't very helpful because we were only closed for half of March. And then things have been closing and reopening. We see different revenue levels and different projections coming in and out. So I think what we'll get in the next week or two is a nice shot of June and the reopening. And what difference has that made compared to May and April? And what can we hope July and August as we continue to reopen things? Moving tax filing deadline is also a very complicating factor. You know, 15th, everyone has to have their taxes filed, and we can use that information through the end of June as we build our budget for the next year. Now with taxes being due July 15th, we don't have that number of what has been paid. And sure, we can see what's been owed, but that's different than what comes in. And that's, you know, money that will get used over the next fiscal year. You know, just a lot going on and a lot of questions, unfortunately. So that $5.25 billion budget level funds the state through July. And that's not unusual. Unfortunately, the legislature is often in recent years late with the budget and passes a July budget just to keep things moving. And that's where we're at right now. It's a little different, of course, because of everything, all the extenuating circumstances. And we know that when the budget does come out, it's going to be shifted. You know, we're going to be looking at like this $1 billion bill yesterday, all these COVID-19 as things open, all the PPE, all the cleaning supplies, all the things we need in this world now that we didn't need last fall, last summer, you know, and also a shift to telehealth, a shift to mental health services. We know this is having a traumatic effect on students, on families, on, you know, victims of domestic violence. There's so many areas, substance abuse, you know, there's so many areas that folks aren't getting the services they need or not adequately getting the services they need, or folks are going to be in need of those services. Just unemployment rates and unemployment costs. We just passed a million people in Massachusetts on unemployment. Even last week, people are still signing up. We had about 30,000 people sign up just this week, and that's something I want to say loud and clear. If anybody's watching and having issues with your unemployment, give my office a call. That's what me and my staffer have been working on nonstop. And there's complications in the last couple of weeks with more furloughs going on, with fraud.
Right.
All of a sudden, 3 weeks ago, people were getting letters in the mail saying, you've been approved for unemployment. And these were people who hadn't applied for unemployment. And so that's thrown a kink in the works, not just to follow that and who's doing that and stopping that, but also looking at the other accounts and making sure that people who are filing are who they say they are. And so that's kind of slowed things down quite a bit. But that's something people can reach out to me if they have questions about that, for sure.
And I'd love to put a little plug in there around unemployment insurance and something I've been hearing from folks in Easthampton, but both on employer and employee. I think that there's funny enough. I mean, the unemployment insurance regulations being brought in to be more encompassing, along with the pandemic unemployment insurance. I certainly hear, well, why would people come back to work? Because they're getting paid so much. And my first response to that is, well, it would probably involve a swear word, which I know Easthampton media, I can't say, but we want people to stay home. And God forbid people who are making between, tip wages and $20 an hour actually get to stay home and stay healthy and be with their family or whatnot. That's okay with me. I would love to see that extended. And I know some of it's a national, but just some consideration around that's what insurance is for, right? To ensure your health and well-being, not to mention of society. So anything I can do or write or plug for that. And I really want to push that point with everybody in Boston and DC. But then that rolls into a second question, Dan, that I know is something you work so much on and hard and coming out of a school system and teaching and school committee is Chapter 70 money, but also the reconfiguration of public education and how that, never mind the work impact is huge, but how that impacts, honestly, our students and the family relationships, and just stretches those so much further. I mean, I'm hoping that Chapter 70 money at least stays level, but then I think about what the teachers are talking about, what they need, and the regulations that are coming out today for public schools, and it's like ships passing in the night. I'm really worried about Chapter 7 money, and we don't have enough now. But how are we going to have enough to really give, the best educational experience as possible and figure that out? So any insight into that, Representative?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that area around, reopenings from early education and childcare to K to higher ed. And, I'm on the education committee, and there's a separate higher ed committee. So that's a separate conversation. But with all the colleges around here, I've got regular calls with all the local colleges, communities, to the privates and UMass, and looking at what that world's going to look like in the fall. I was a little disappointed that it took the commissioners so long to get us this report that I was going to announce this afternoon and shoot it out to the public. I just got a copy about an hour ago, so I haven't even been able to dig into it too much yet. Yeah. But the bottom line is I don't think this is what it's going to say, but my reading of it is the commissioner is saying what so many people are saying about so many fields. We're not sure what this is going to look like. Yeah. We're not sure if the virus is going to spike. We know we still have a problem here with this virus. And so he's encouraging districts to come up with a plan to bring everybody back. And, in my heart of hearts, that's what I want to happen. let's get these kids back to each other, to their friends, to their teachers, but let's do it safely. And so there's guidelines in there, to try to keep desks 3 feet apart, to try to, make sure there's all the hand sanitizer and cleaning going on and everything that we need to do to keep everyone safe and healthy.
Right.
He also says, come up with a plan for in-person classroom, come up with a hybrid plan that has some in-person, some learning, and come up with an all remote learning. We don't want to be caught surprised again like we were at the end of this past school. If this thing does spike, now we've got lessons learned. So let's come up with these hybrid plans and have a remote plan in place. Hopefully we don't need it, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, but have it in place because we're not sure what September will look like, October, November. So I've been talking with a lot of teachers, a lot of superintendents. I helped convene all the Western Mass superintendents and brought on some of my colleagues from across the state to listen in as some of the education members were working on the opening plan, and we've had these oversight hearings. And one of the superintendents said something that stuck with me. This is from a couple of weeks ago, but she said, this remote learning, when it compares to classroom teaching, you're not comparing apples to apples or even apples to oranges. We're comparing apples to Corvettes. That's how different remote learning is from in classroom. Yeah. And I think we really need to be cognizant of that and what's in the best interest of these students while we're keeping everyone safe, So it'll be interesting to hear what the governor has to say today and be able to dig into that a little bit. But as far as funding is concerned, with $7 to $8 billion in lost revenues going forward, it's going to be tough for every sector, bottom line.
I agree. I love the apples to Corvettes.
I never heard that one before. I don't know if she.
I was like, wow, I don't know.
It really stuck out to me. But funding for schools has been maybe my top priority in the legislature.
Yes.
And passing the Student Opportunity Act last year was a huge success with the help of so many teachers and great advocates and great people who care about schools. And that was a 7-year promise to boost funding a little every year. And we already saw the governor try to undercut that a little, pushing back on that already. And so that fight continues. We say, all right, this is a very tight budget, but what are our priorities? Like you mentioned earlier, what are our priorities? Let's put our money where our mouth is and put our dollars where our priorities are. And that starts with schools and with the well-being of our younger generations.
Absolutely.
Something we continue to fight. I joined, I've been in communication with House Ways and Means and leadership and submitted a formal letter just last week saying the exact thing. We know the budget's tight, but let's start with the Student Opportunity Act. Let's start with education. Yeah. And so we'll see as the budget process moves along. A lot of these kinds of questions, but definitely a priority.
I want to leave time for, I'm keeping track of time here for questions, but something that is coming up so much for people who are living in Easthampton or needing to access it for jobs is daycare, right? So there's no, in Easthampton, no pools, no spray parks, no camps. Like no one could show me how we could keep anybody safe. I mean, there wasn't enough time to plan. There wasn't enough money, but bottom line, it all seemed not to matter because the science was so fluid, to say the very least. But emergency daycares, you could open, and we had a couple of those in Easthampton. I know you're very well aware of it. And there were some real grave concerns about regulation or easing of regulations that went to the direct safety of our little ones as well as the workers. And now they're starting to open. And I think it was this morning or yesterday, they talked about the money needed to really get daycare open safely. I mean, what are you hearing on the Hill? Is there any relief? I mean, the daycare providers, family daycare and centers are literally like taping it together to try to be safe, have a safe learning environment for, 0 to 4-year-olds.
Absolutely. Yep. This is an issue that's been at the forefront a couple of weeks. And it's so important. Childcare is necessary for folks to go back to work, for the state to reopen.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that a lot of these centers are small businesses, local businesses,
Yeah.
So, the governor's administration put out the reopening guidelines, and they were very strict. And
They were.
like all the guidelines have been, it's not an easy process to reopen and to keep everyone 6 feet apart,
Right.
masks on and everything else. And it's even more complicated when you're talking about 0 to 4-year-olds, and so there was, I heard a lot, and I brought that back to the administration, and they, did loosen some of those guidelines, because a lot of it is very expensive to have all the PPE, to have the cleaning supplies. Every kid's temperature every time they enter the room, that's an added expense and an added time. So some of those things were able to be loosened. It still is very tough to reopen. I had a good call last week with the EEA commissioner, who we call Commissioner Sam by her first name. Her last name is tough to pronounce. Eijner Tree Warji, and Commissioner, she was able to give us a little more insight, and I was encouraging her to spread that to across the state. One thing that stood out to me, she said, we're not going to be the hug police. And I thought, well, let's get that word out to our child care providers, because they're really concerned about that. Keeping 6 feet apart is an impossible task. And so, so much of it is, it falls on the local boards of health and that local health agency to enforce. And so, we continue to work with them. I'm talking with her again next Tuesday about these guidelines and bringing back. That's something the administration has been good with, taking feedback from, adjusting things as needed. So I think we might see some more adjustments there. But on the legislative side, there's not. I see the legislature's biggest role in this sector as finding some money. Let's help these small businesses reopen. There are some grants available right now, but I don't think it's enough. And I think they're a little tough to get. So many grants are reimbursable, which is not helpful sometimes. If you need the money, you might not have the money to front it. So there's a lot of, that's being worked on, and there's a lot of great conversations going on. But we also need some too, so.
And I just worry about family daycares. I mean, you're talking about folks who are running daycares are, large majority are women, people of color. It's like the most nascent entrepreneurial, probably business kind of thing you can do that's often in people's homes. And for someone who's running daycare, working in a daycare and looking at those regulations, understanding the health risks, and then making a choice of opening their family daycare or not going back to work in a family daycare because of the inherent risk, it just seems, it doesn't seem, it's untenable. So when I hear folks being told, if you don't come work back in this daycare, we're going to call unemployment and say you were offered work and it was denied. I mean, we're referring those people to the AG, but I would just say in the conversations in the Hill, that has to be taken into account because you're passionate about a particular job. It shouldn't be, exposure for you, your family, or to the kids that you're, gosh forbid, somebody goes shopping after they're working at a daycare and they get someone sick or whatnot. I mean, nobody wants it. And then the last, and then we'll go to questions. My question or plea is a lot of small businesses, but also workers themselves are asking about insurance liability and contact tracing. So if they chose to open and someone either came in as an employee or a customer and people get sick within that business environment, where are they? with their liability insurance. They're very afraid of just being shut down and being sued or not being covered by insurance. And it's like it's making them hesitate. And I've not been able to get a straight answer from the Division of Insurance, and different insurance companies are responding in different ways to businesses and whatnot. And I don't know if that's something that a conversation that your office could have with the Division of Insurance, or there's something on the floor or in committee that might be coming up.
And let me just make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You're talking really about business's liability for a customer contracting the virus.
Yeah.
On their site. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's a great question, and I'm very happy to dig in. Insurance and labor and workforce development. You know, my gut. I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to make legal guesses here.
Right.
I think that's a very important issue, and I'll look into that and follow up with you. But I did want to mention, based on our last conversation and some of our unemployment conversations so far.
Yeah.
There is some clear guidance that returning to work or forcing your employees to return to work, is qualified on a case-to-case basis.
Okay.
So, that doesn't sound like clear guidance because, they're going to examine each case individually, but it's clear that they will do that, which is important because people should know if you're not comfortable going back to work, you should have recourse, and you should be looking into this and, having someone look into it. If you've got, even in the best of times, if you're healthy and there's a job available, you should be working, and according to unemployment rules. And now that stays, but if you're healthy and it's safe for you to go to work, that context has changed,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you live at home with your grandfather and he's vulnerable, is susceptible to this virus, that may well be reason enough for you not to go to work and interact with the public all day long and then come home, a living situation. And so that's something you should know, and the AG's office has been clear on.
Something that comes up, It's something, that really kind of goes through all of folks' basic, health checking questions. Speaking of questions, so Ryan,
before we get to questions,
yes,
just so I don't forget, there's two things I wanted to bring up.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry.
You had asked me offline about the census.
Oh shoot! Yes. Thank you.
And I did a little homework. And last we spoke a couple months ago, we were excited because Easthampton had the #2 response rate of all cities across the state. We are now #1. That's just for cities, not for towns.
Okay.
There's 351 cities and towns, but of the cities, the state average is 63.7% for everybody, 63.7%. Easthampton's response rate is 77.1%. And so that's very
great.
I want those other 23%. Let's count everybody and make sure we're getting federal and state money and grants allocated to Easthampton, to all my communities. But I thought that was very exciting.
Yes, thank you so much for
And then the other good news I wanted to share is that yesterday, the Massachusetts Commission on Women had their, they call them Commonwealth heroines, starting this year. Unsung heroines, which is a recognition I believe you've received in the past.
Yes, in 2011.
And it's really a great program. And to oversimplify it, it's to recognize women in our community who make the difference but don't always make the headlines. And I was proud to nominate Annette Siegel from Easthampton, who I think that definition so perfectly as a crossing guard street school, as a volunteer on the Rail Trail Committee and an election, working at the polling places, and you just see her everywhere. The Winterfest Chili Cook-Off, real assets. We're lucky. We have so many great volunteers giving back. But
that's wonderful.
It was great to see her recognized statewide yesterday for all her time and
That's
just
wonderful.
caring for Easthampton.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I
great.
submitted that. I got a press release off to the Gazette. Hopefully that they write something and recognize her so we can spread it. But I wanted to share it here also, make sure everybody knows.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Representative. Thank you for the census update. Great. So Ryan, where are we? I mean, I'm seeing comments and stuff. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read them, but are there questions specifically for the representative or clarifications, or where are we going with questions?
Do you want me to we have several questions. I could try to wrangle them by topic, or I could just read them. We got 3 right now.
I don't know. Let's just start with the first one and move on through.
All right. Our first question in the chat is from Kevin Van Odenhove. And he says, on the topic of policing, I was curious how we came up with $12,000 or a 12% raise to the chief's salary. I'm also curious what the additional $60,000 in incentive includes or implies. Thank you.
Both figures are contractual. The police chief has a contract that is negotiated with the mayor's office every 3 years, and there are incentives that around education and training, years on the force, longevity, and whatnot. And it had been negotiated, and that was the increases that you saw on the chief's line. On the incentives, used to be called, and I know Representative Carey is familiar with the Quinn bill. So that line item are for educational incentives for the police force. That's also bargained in their collective bargaining agreement, and it goes for, if you get an associate's, if you get an additional certification, that there's incentives that are on top of or part of your base pay. So those are our 2 contractual lines.
Okay. Our next question is from Myra Oidemi. Speaking of childcare, in terms of before and after school programs that are offered at EPS locations, what is the plan for them in terms of the full open, hybrid, or full remote plan? If they are to open, how do we make these programs affordable?
Yeah, so I'll kick a little bit over to the representative on the education committee around going forward and innovation. So the before and after school programs that we have had really were 2 very disparate kind of places where if depending on where you are in the free lunch program, you had access to some of those services if we were given the grant money for that. And then there was other that was, basically pay to attend and not a lot in between. Before COVID, I started having some pretty serious conversations with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, as well as Hampshire Franklin Community Action, and the library about what we could do to, not even fill the gap, but just kind of like smooth the continuum of services over. And the result was kind of a hodgepodge of grants, but also reallocation of resources and maybe a partnership with an outside agency to provide those services directly in Easthampton. So now with COVID, we're waiting a little bit about Chapter 90 money, but also that extra money for after school programming, whether that's just recreational, like a meal, recreational and homework help, or something like coding camps, were offered at one point at Whitebrook after school and really popular and looking at that. I think, I think that solution for Easthampton, honestly, we qualified less and less for grants for after school programming, is that we need to bring in a partner, just like we're doing with the rent relief. We need to get an expert who will work with the city to provide services in the city for residents. And I think that's the way we have to go. Now, what pot of money we use to get that going, and if it's hybrid or not, I'm not I'm not sure. I have to figure out a funding source, and we were close. I will say, as a mayor, just to be clear, as far as there need to be options. I think all three kinds of options, like Representative Carey went to, where there's all in person or a hybrid or all remote. And I think we need to do our best to give our families as many choices like that as possible. As a mayor and as somebody who was on the reopening committee, I believe, I know I can, that schools shouldn't be back in session in the fall. I think it's a tremendous waste of money, and we should support families where they are and to stay home and get them those supports for home or very small community-based lessons. We're just going to go back to putting that crushing burden on the working poor and lower middle class and schools. It's just too much of a risk. Why reopen during a time we expect a second wave when we're not done with the first wave? And I'm very proud of Easthampton and Massachusetts public health data rates and the support from the legislature to get that done. But like, there's not a line here to run across and win this race. It's always flattening the curve, and so that's not my decision because I can't make that decision alone. But not understanding why we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get kids back into a building that will not meet any specific curricular data points or whatnot, when we can't get them all computers. So I could go on. I'm going to butt my lip. It's listening time. So I don't know if you want to put anything on that, Representative.
Just to add, if the schools are open, it's my great hope that the before and after schools are open also.
Right.
If we have safety procedures in place during the day, we should be able to extend them into the after school programs. And those programs are such great supports for so many students and so many families. One thing you mentioned briefly that I wanted to dig in a little more was the free and reduced lunch, and how having a certain percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch changes the reimbursement, changes the food programs.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm a member of the legislature's food systems caucus, and we had a great Tuesday with a lot of stakeholders from across the state. And it was mentioned that because so many people are on unemployment, there's been so many changes in so many careers and so many families, there's an expected vast uptick of students who will now qualify for free lunch. And I haven't had a chance yet to dig into Easthampton's numbers, but I know in the past only Maple Street School has qualified for and many programs. And that's something that I'm not happy that we're increasing in town, but if that opens up resources to us, that could be helpful as we navigate this difficult situation.
No, I would be very interested to see what those numbers look like. Other questions?
Yes, Jason Montgomery has a question for you and for Representative Carey. So I'm going to let him unmic and ask his question. Jason?
Yeah, the first two questions are for Representative Carey. You talked a little bit about, mental health and the new COVID spike. Can you talk at all about what is actually being done, however, not for able-bodied citizens who are experiencing mental health issues, like episodic mental health issues because of a crisis situation, but to help the thousands of people that are right now with long-term disabilities who are trapped in nursing homes across the state. We can't get them out fast enough, and as we all know, the COVID virus is affecting that population at greater numbers than just about any other population. I mean, I work with Stavros Center for Independent Living right now. We can't even get pressure-treated lumber to build ramps to get people out of nursing and group homes. So I hate to kind of say this, but like the episodic mental health issues that able-bodied individuals of, upper to middle class are having are secondary to people dying in nursing homes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that point and your work with Stavros. That's a great organization doing a lot of good work. I don't mean to say that because we're going to see an uptick in children's mental health and we're going to need additional resources that we shouldn't be supporting any of the programming you're doing.
Well, we're not. I mean, we're not seeing the resources needed to actually get people out of homes. I mean, and like I said, right now we can't even get pressure treated lumber to buy ramps. That's supply chain issues. I mean, we received some money through the community foundation, but I mean, there needs to be greater support because it feels as though right now the baseline is continue to do the same work that you've been doing because we're going to have this other stuff we're going to have to spend money on. So.
Yeah, I mean, as we work on the budget, and that's going to be a priority area, and that's something I've been working with the Mental Health Substance Use and Recovery Committee on these issues, and just this budget we did yesterday included, I think, about $40 million for congregate care facilities, and that's just something I totally agree with you. We haven't done enough, even in the best of times. This is something that's been lacking in Massachusetts, and we need to keep a focus on. And so that's going to be our challenge now, is to keep the focus on and make sure we don't say, oh, we gave you a couple bucks this budget yesterday. Now we're not going to talk about you again for the rest of the budget process. And that we're continuing, to add to these supports because it's already lacking. I couldn't agree with you more.
So, second question, you talked a little bit, and it was very reminiscent of the bad apples argument that's happened. You said, to keep the bad actors, the licensure, which I actually really appreciate what Bud and the Black and Latinx Caucus are doing with this. But my question is, and this is a little bit of a devil's advocacy question, what would you say to those of us who look at this and say, when apples are killing people, why are we trying to fix the orchard? Because you brought up that same kind of argument, like, well, we're going to try to remove the bad players from the police.
Yes, I mean that specific bill and that program, the post program, the certification program. So talking about that bill, the fact that Massachusetts, one of 4 or 6 states in the country that doesn't have a certification process for police, that's a problem. That's crazy to me, and so that I think is a great first step for us. I don't think we institute the post program and never talk about law enforcement again, but when we look at the history of policing and the fact that there's people who've been written up who've had use of force issues, who've had and any other, just because that's the profession they chose, they can with it. They can move to the next town and work for that department until they get fired from there, and then move to the next town and continue to reoffend. I think that's a huge problem, and this is a good first step to making sure that we're putting something in place to take care of issues like that. Okay,
and my final question is actually for the mayor. We had a conversation after the last town hall where we were going to talk about demilitarization of the Easthampton police and a moratorium on that. During that conversation, you told me that you were fighting right now for a 10% reduction in the police budget. I asked you flat out if that meant a 10% reduction over the 2019 budget, and you told me yes. The current budget that's been out and now I understand is approved actually has a $24,000 or a 1% increase for the police budget. Yep. How do you rectify what you told me and what we? I was wrong, Jason. It's a short answer. I was wrong. Okay. I took 10% off of what they requested. Wrong about what you were proposing, and now you're kind of shrugging it off and saying I was wrong about the number. Jason, I looked at the wrong number. They requested. If I can finish my sentence, Jason. This really isn't. I mean, I understand your feelings about it, but this is basically me looking at what the police department requested and me cutting that request. And you asked me if it was from fiscal year 2019, and I said it was, and I was wrong. It's what they requested in 2020, and I cut that.
I kept both fire and police.
Okay.
That's all. Any other questions?
Yes, this question is from Peter Marks, and it is, will there be a town hall or another opportunity for parents to address the school committee in regards to the school's models for the fall?
Yes, so there's always public speak, but I'm hoping the governor, and I'm going to double check that with Representative Carey. Today, the governor is laying out those guidelines publicly for schools and options.
Yes, I believe he's got a noon press conference.
Okay.
About it, and then the report will go public right around that time or right after, I think.
And my understanding then, once that happens, the school committee, the superintendent and chair person, Cynthia Kwasinski, will build that into the subcommittee work of the school committee, certainly public speak, but also public comment around how that affects Easthampton. School committee, the superintendent has set up smaller work groups, kind of doing exactly what Representative Carey said of all remote, a hybrid, everybody at schools, and getting, all those pieces kind of lined up, and then waiting for the guidance. So yes, there will be more opportunity. And I believe that there will also be opportunity through the community relations meetings too. We're setting up that new schedule. So absolutely.
All right. Another, this is more of a comment also from Peter Marks, an idea about our local police. They're frequently driving through our neighborhood. What do you think about them instead parking their cruisers some days and walking through the neighborhood in order to meet the local residents in person and build a stronger relationship with the community?
I think it's a great idea.
All right. And I think it's a great idea too. Myra Oidemi.
That's a great idea.
Would love to hear more from Representative Carey about the 10 action points from the City Council of Springfield and his thoughts about how these action steps could be applied in Easthampton.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier the 10 action points from the legislative Black and Latino caucus, of which it's shared by a Springfield rep. If there's a separate 10 points from the Springfield City Council, I'm not up to snuff on that, but I can tell you more about the action points I mentioned earlier. There's 10 of them. 4 are related to the federal government, 4 are related to the state government, and 2 are directed at local governments. And so my focus as a state legislator has been on the 4 state actions. The first request they had was to pass a bill that was already filed to create a commission to study POST programs. And again, that's POST is an acronym for Peace Officer Standards and Training. And so the governor's already filed a new bill, not to make a commission, not to study it, but just to implement it, which I think is great, and takes that action step, puts some action behind it, and actually goes a little further and quicker, which I think is what we should be doing. The second one was to pass a bill that has to do with civil service and reviewing the exam and the oversight of civil service. The third one was to create a commission on structural racism. And the fourth one had to do with police use of force and setting some clear statutory limits on police use of force. And so we've seen in the last couple of weeks, bills filed in the House, in the Senate by the governor. We've got some subcommittees, for lack of a better word, in the House working on this issue, in the Senate working on this issue. Great leadership from Rep. Gonzalez, Rep. Williams, the whole caucus. And I know the Speaker and the House team is working on an omnibus bill that will bring together all of these ideas and more, I believe, but that's still being worked on. That hasn't been filed yet. But there's a real urgency to get something done by the end of July, which is when the session is scheduled to end for formal votes. I suspect we'll go further into the year because we lost out on a couple months of formal sessions when the pandemic first hit us. But now that we're back and holding formal sessions remotely, I think these are some of the topics that are going to be worked on and passed this session. And that's my hope as well.
Great.
All right. One more comment in the chat from Jason Montgomery. I would still like to know how you made a mistake in claiming you were going to make a reduction in the overall budget and it turned into an increase in the police budget.
I did make a decrease in the overall budget because I did not grant the police their request.
You had claimed that you were making a 10% reduction in their overall budget to fund a food certification officer and an additional housing officer. And I may be mistaken. They had a $24,000 increase in their overall budget. I had asked you if that was going to be 10% less than the amount of money they got in 2019. You said
I was wrong. There are 3 columns, Jason.
That's not wrong.
Jason,
wrong.
I can't solve your feelings towards me. I'm telling you, I was wrong. I didn't lie. There's nothing here. I would encourage you, Jason, at 11:30, we're doing another town hall with the budget director, with our treasurer, and we can walk through those numbers. But I'd like to see if anybody else has questions for Representative Carey or myself around what we talked about that. Okay, so at 11:30, why don't you rejoin? Thank you, Jason. Are there any other questions, Ryan?
No other questions in the chat right now. If there's anybody else that wants to ask a question, unmute themselves now. Otherwise, we'll take some ending statements from you and Representative Carey. Is there anybody? I see Jean Francis has her hand up. I'm going to unmute you.
Am I unmuted?
Yep, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Great. Hi, Nicole.
Hi. How are you?
I've been better. I'm appreciating getting such an update on the pandemic and what you all are doing and what the state's doing and what we're doing here in town. But a couple of things I want to bring up. I have a question and then I have some comments too. And they're specifically to you, Nicole, and to us here in Easthampton. So one thing I see, and I know that Jason has brought this up about the $24,000 increase to the police. Given the time that we are in, given what is going on since the killing of George Floyd and how much racism is so up right now in the country and in the world, looking at us here in this country, isn't this a time that you could rescind that money and or put a freeze on raises, especially when people in this right here in town and in our country don't have jobs anymore, being laid off? We give the police chief a raise.
Right.
It just seems shameful and ludicrous to me. So that's one big question to you about, can't that be rescinded? And can't we put a freeze on police department raises for sure? The comment that I have is that I know that the school department was level funded. So I'm very curious to know why the school department didn't get any money when we have huge issues of racism in our schools. And why don't we have more money going into that, to talking to our teachers about racism, to the superintendent, to Julianne, to all of them about why we're not getting more instruction and more looking at racism in our schools, because that's where it's going to start. So those are my comments. I'd really appreciate your that's my comment. I'd like to hear your answer to the question about the raises.
So the police chief and increases, it's a negotiated contract. And while I could dishonor or break that contract, it would be a legal liability to the city. And I feel like we would incur more costs. with the lawyers than we would with the current contract. And the same with the raises in the police contract. I do not have a fiscal basis at this time to put a freeze on any increases because of where we are in the budget. Our budget is stitched together okay right now, which I know is going to change, and we're going to have to look at all of that. But right now, a legal basis to look at that contract, I don't have without honestly incurring pretty significant financial costs to the city. And it's not something I want to focus, no more than I want to focus on bringing. Yeah, I just, they're two contracts. Level funding the schools was indefinitely purposeful on mine. I put that letter out before COVID-19 and was very directive to the superintendent and the school committee that the school gets money every year from students that are choicing into Easthampton, and it's anywhere between $600,000 and $800,000. And that is a pot of money no other department in the city has access to, and I encourage them strongly that they should use their reserve in the coming fiscal year to fill in the gaps that were going to take place with level funding from the city itself. And we don't, the money, the tuition that comes into the schools, like when somebody decides from Holyoke to come to school to Easthampton, goes right back into the school budget. It's not money that the city can reallocate. And I encourage them to use that reserve, just like the city uses their reserves to plug holes in the budget.
Can I make a couple more comments, please?
Sure. I mean,
Okay.
well, it's 11:01. I want to be careful. Can on 11:30, can you come back on this? And I'll keep answering. I have a.
All right, I'll come back. I'll come back.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay, so it's 11:01. Dan, if you want to wrap this up, and I'll say at 11:30, Treasurer Jen Gallant is going to be on for an hour with me talking through budget questions and what our process is. But also a lot of people have asked, well, how do we make a difference going forward? The budget process, especially this year, like for the next fiscal year, actually is a little different. And we'll talk about that at 11:30 and input and direction. And I'll hand it over to Representative Carey to finish up.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me. It's great to be with everybody. I think it was a year ago today that we were at the State House. You and Councilor Pete, Councilor Risk, Councilor Gomez came.
Oh, wow.
Saw me at the State House, and we testified before the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, getting ranked choice voting on the ballot. And I really wish we were able to gather in person, all of us. But I think we'll be there soon, I hope. In the meantime, my office is still open, even though we're not out and about in town. People should feel free to email me directly, daniel.carey@mahouse.gov, or call my local office numbers 413-529-4286. And it's just great to be here to see everybody. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And at 11:30, Jen Gallant will be on another actual town hall. Are we streaming that, or is that going to be people can? I want to make sure that Gene Francis and whatnot can get back on this, right? At 11:30.
It's going to be available. You would click on the same link that you clicked on to get into this one. I don't think we're going to be streaming it live. It'll be available, an hour or two after it's over on our YouTube channel.
But people, we can have this because we're going to have the same type of conversation.
Yes.
Okay, great. Excellent. Yes. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the hasty ending, and I hope to see all of you at 11:30. And Representative Carey, thank you so much. I know there's a lot, and we would like you back on here sooner rather than later with updates.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Be safe, everyone. Yes. Bye-bye.